Welcome back, subscribers, and welcome new viewers. Today, I am going to read from the Saturn book, and the author is Liz Green, and I want to thank Kristi for enabling me to be able to read Natal Saturn in Cancer for all of you who have that in your natal chart. So thank you, Kristi. And really quick, before I start, I want to tell everyone that my book is now printed and ready for any of you who are wanting a copy. So just send me an email if you are interested at thecreativewoman369@gmail.com. All right, so I'm very excited. It's a beautiful book. In fact, let me really quick just get one for you. I should have had that ready, but okay, so here it is, the finished product. I'm so happy and excited. So again, any of you who are wanting to purchase this, it's $22 plus shipping wherever you are. And so just send me an email because I'm doing all the shipping myself. I'm an individual. It's just me. So, okay, let's get started. All right, Saturn in Cancer and the fourth house. So it's also for any of you who have Cancer in the fourth house as well. All right, the fourth house, excuse me, let me start again. The fourth house corresponding to Cancer and the moon is the dominion. Oh boy, the dominion. Well, it could be the dominion. That's not what it says. Is the domain of childhood, origin, family, and roots. As the base of the astrological chart, it represents the base of the individual himself, both literally in terms of the home he has come out of, and symbolically in terms of his inner sense of security and safety. This house describes the emotions and atmosphere which surround him before he is old enough to make a conscious and rational choice about whether he accepts them or not. This house may be associated with the Jungian idea of the personal unconscious and with areas of conditioned instinctual reactions imposed by the early environment. Because of this association with influences that occur prior to the development of the discriminating mind, any planet based here is highly suspect because it points to something in the psyche which must be first discovered and brought up to the surface before it can be dealt with constructively. The influence of this house lies like a great moving subterranean river beneath the surface of the later personality, which is developed in accord with the sun and the ascendant. And this river may be powerful enough to dominate the behavior without being seen. It is a wholly personal house and does not seem to have much to do with the larger area of collective unconscious streams which affect the group emotional life. And I'm being intuitively guided to also say that when it was just now speaking about the underground and undercurrent beneath the surface, and that you might not even know that it's going on, I'm being called to say also take a look at your nodes of the moon, because that very well almost assuredly could definitely also play a part, as well as this Saturn. And especially if you have it in hard aspect to one another, your natal Saturn and your nodes of the moon. Okay. Because it is so personal, it is that much more difficult to approach with a clear and unbiased eye. The fourth house is generally considered to be the indicator of the father and his relationship with the individual. This is, of course, subject to much argument, and the only clear statement which has so far come out of the confusion is that the fourth and 10th house axis, because the fourth and the 10th house are opposite each other, the fourth and 10th house axis refers to both parents. Because that's true. The fourth house has to do with mother and father. And then Cancer, it could also be mother. So just mother if it's in the sign of, if your Saturn is in the sign of Cancer. But Saturn itself has to do with father. Okay. In some ways, it is immaterial which house goes with which parent, as problems with one automatically create compensatory problems with the other. However, I am inclined by experience to assign this house to the father, as it is he who establishes the backbone of the family, gives it his name, and determines by his presence or absence the security or instability of the child's early life. And again, when it's talking father, your Saturn, whether again it's in Cancer and or the fourth house, this is your chart. This is your chart. This is your energy. And so your own father is going to be a representative of someone, an actor in your specific personal natal wheel play. So again, there's no blame. There's no blame. And there's no fault. There's no fault on you or your father or your mother, whatever this might be the case. This is why I love astrology so very much, because this is just showing where the energies are coming from, and that you're going to call these people and energies to you so that you can learn and expose whatever is necessary, whether this is now this talking about Saturn or your Cancer and Saturn or in the fourth house, or whatever planet you're talking about in your natal wheel and or your nodes of the moon. It's just awesome. Awesome. Okay, so let me just find. It is rare that a child loses his mother except by death. But when a marriage fails, or there is no marriage in the first place, it is generally the father who leaves and whose support is withdrawn. The background of a difficult or broken home in childhood is usually coincident with afflicted planets in the fourth house or the fourth sign, which is Cancer. They're saying, so whether if you have more planets or other planets in the fourth house and or Cancer, then that's going to just be even more afflicted, the Saturn, which is absolutely true. It will be obvious that having Saturn working as an unconscious factor from the plane of the feelings is rather difficult, as he is very slippery. He is usually considered, in Cancer or in the fourth house, to suggest conditions of coldness, limitation, authority without love, separation or isolation, and a generally unsympathetic early home life. So again, this is what you were going to experience because of your Saturn either being in Cancer or it being in the 4th house. This is often in a very literal fashion, where the father dies or the parents are divorced, or where the father is forced by circumstances to be away much of the time. The isolation may also occur in a symbolic fashion where the father is very much physically present but can offer no love, sympathy, or emotional support. Or where he may be loving and kind but is a burden or a great disappointment through alcoholism, sickness, weakness of character, or an emotional pattern which destroys the peace of the home. Or there may be undue emphasis on material development and little on emotional expression. There are many possible avenues on the mundane level in which a 4th house Saturn may find reflection. The forms are as varied as our individuals. Regardless of which means of outward expression occurs, however, the inner reaction is generally the same. The sense of security, the feeling of protection needed by a developing child as a base on which to build the evolving ego, is denied or frustrated, and the natural expression of feeling which seeks to find unity with family and a sense of heritage is blocked. So that is absolutely what you were going to, and are, if you're still, this is happening, experience because of the placement and or sign of your Saturn. It needs little further reasoning to see that this kind of situation, working on unconscious levels, can effectively cripple a part of the individual's emotional nature for the remainder of his life if it's not understood. But thankfully, you who are listening are now you can understand. You have the ability because you have the information. And that is outstanding. The mistrust of any emotional intimacy, particularly the kind which revolves around a domestic situation, is usually pronounced. At the same time, a craving for something secure and permanent and tangible in the emotional life is also pronounced. And I'm getting called to say again, check your nodes of the moon, because I'm not saying all of you, but there are some of you definitely that this is going to pertain to your Saturn in aspect to your nodes of the moon. A big deal, because our nodes of the moon, again, if you don't already know, that is where each and every one of our personal work is. But it is put into our subconscious at birth. So you're not going to know what it is consciously. You're going to automatically do your South Node, which feels like the right way, but it's not. You must work through and know, first of all, before you can work through your South Node properly, you must know it consciously. Okay. It is a rare individual who is aware of this polarity existing within him. He will see one end or the other. He may either be inordinately tied to his family and the place of his birth, or he may hate them or display coolness and detachment. So again, you're going to have one of those for sure. Maybe a little bit of both, I'm getting for some. He is never truly indifferent, however, for something which was necessary for his emotional development was missing. And the entire structure of his psyche has had to develop lopsided to compensate for the loss. There's often great emotional instability with Saturn in the fourth house, and a definite feeling of having been unloved, unwanted is common. This may not be wholly conscious, however. Nevertheless, it will show in a very obvious fashion to the prospective observer. There is also often resentment toward men in general, as the father is the first man or symbol of masculinity encountered by the child. So again, this is where that comes from. It's your Saturn. So, and don't feel bad, don't feel guilty. Of course, you're going to automatically have anger, resentment, blame your father, but now you know you don't have to do that anymore. This is where it comes from. Again, facts change feelings. So you can let that anger go. You can, no more resentment and no more blaming yourself for blaming your father. No blame at all. This is where it comes from, and you didn't know. But now you do. And now you can make things right if that's possible. First of all, make things right within yourself, and then if that's possible, with your father. And even if your father is not alive anymore, you can make it right. He can hear you from the other side. He absolutely can. I was feeling very strong called to say that. Your father loves you. He loves you. He's always loved you. And he will always love you, no matter what. This can, of course, wreak havoc with a man's understanding of his own masculinity and a woman's understanding both of men and of her own unconscious male half. This is particularly true if the father is actually absent from the home, for then, however justified she may be, the mother must play both roles, and consequently, whether she is temperamentally suited to the role or not, she must become a dominant or authoritative figure. This is as much true of the weak or inept father as it is of the vanishing one. The areas of the emotional life which can be affected in adulthood are much greater than the sphere of the home, for the fourth house is one of the angles and is therefore more significant in terms of the expression of the man on the physical plane. Saturn in the fourth house is also often concurrent with a compulsion to accumulate land. In this way, the need for some sense of security on the emotional level is reduced to a physical fact. A common translation with Saturn very often attempts to make. The translation usually fails, however, for material things cannot satisfy an emotional need. But to the person carrying this emotional burden, land is solid and unchangeable. A home which is owned cannot be taken away in the same fashion that emotional support can suddenly be torn away by death or absence. The unchecked crystallization of a feeling value will eventually, as the individual hardens and grows older, lead to that which has been referred to as a lonely end of life. It will be obvious from this that a fourth house Saturn, and to a lesser extent Saturn in Cancer, for his influence seems to be more obvious in the houses than in the signs, can rule the life with an iron, although invisible hand, by undermining the sense of self-worth and making it difficult for the individual to permit any close emotional contacts. It is the meaning of the position that is necessary if it is to be utilized in a constructive way. By denying a component which ordinarily comes from the environment, Saturn's influence forces an individual to create that missing component in himself if he is to have any peace. He must gradually withdraw identification of the value with the external world and find its reality within himself as a part of his own psyche. Thus, the opportunity is offered, when Saturn is in the fourth house, for the person to build an inner sense of security and self-acceptance based on an understanding of his real origin. This solid inner psychic structure cannot be destroyed or shaken by circumstance, unlike the support and confidence given by a loving parent, which fosters emotional dependency on others later in life. The worst aspect of Cancer, this inner strength becomes the inviolable possession of the soul. What begins as an emotional value must remain an emotional value, but the field of its expression is expanded. This kind of security on the feeling level is extremely rare. The great majority of individuals bear many scars because of the loss of security in childhood, or they are dependent on loved ones for a constant supply of it. Only the individual with Saturn in the fourth house is likely to have developed it on his own, and this because he has had to. There is some amount of trust required in the guidance or wisdom of the inner self who has chosen this particular experience. Without this trust, there is no possibility of understanding the meaning of the experience. Saturn always drives a man to understand the nature of his pain. With a fourth house Saturn, he must understand the vulnerability of his own feeling nature and the needlessness which underlies his apparent coldness toward all family and domestic matters. It is then necessary to accept the experience as a positive means to an end, which will be worth the pain and the effort, since the pain is relative to the dependency on others in the first place. The very personal and intimate world of the feelings must be acknowledged and encouraged. This is particularly difficult for men to do, and for this reason a fourth house Saturn is more dangerous on a man's chart. But in compensation, a man with Saturn placed here who has taken the time to descend into his own emotional depths, as do the heroes of mythology in the underworld, will display that rare integration and serenity which comes from a balancing of the masculine and feminine sides of the nature. Okay, wow, big deal. Like, I am definitely sure all of you who are listening that have this placement are now understanding and getting some conscious conclusions and aha moments. So any of you who would like a written copy, let me know and I will send you one. Okay. Until next time. Bye.